on second grade black boys, right? Because we've got to get them on reading level by third grade, because third grade is the grade in which the private prisons, which are about 35 miles from us, start building new facilities based on how well the third grade boys can read.
All right. Hey, everybody. It's Emiliana Martin with another Revivalist conversation. We're going to be talking with my friend Bill Breck, and then we've invited another friend from a Passion Talk. His name is Shamichael Hallman. Shamichael works at a library in downtown Memphis, in the main library, and I'm going to let him tell his story real briefly, but let's just get started and let's just dive into this. Shamichael, can you tell us, first of all, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Your voice is so important to me. I cannot tell you. Could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. I've been a full-time pastor for 7 years. Last 3 years, I've been doing a dual role as pastor in the weekends and helping to transform historic library in downtown Memphis over the last few years. When I met you, I was involved in and still involved in a global initiative called Code for the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm. That's still happening?
Still happening, yeah, which has sought to unleash technologists across the world, build technology for the kingdom.
Yeah.
And so, that's a little bit about me.
Well, I'm glad you could make it. There's so much happening, oh my goodness. And we sort of talked a little bit last week, so I'm just going to dive into my favorite question, which was, no, I can't dive into that. So not yet.
Oh, wow.
Just tell me about how these last 3 weeks have been for you and your family.
It's a range of emotions, some sadness and grief, some anger and frustration, mm-hmm. Definitely some moments of hope. So it's been a whirlwind of sorts, right?
Tell me about those moments of hope. What have you seen that's made you hopeful?
I think I just by default try to always save some hope, right? That you've got to hang on to hope, a hope that's rooted in Christ. I think one particular thing that gave me hope. We'll see what happens. Was so our church. We're a multi-site model, so our main campus is in the heart of the city, and caters to primarily a Black audience. But we have another location that's out in the suburban part of the city, and it's 90% white, 8% Black. Most of the protests and demonstrations have been in the city center, in downtown Memphis.
You were pulled into the protest last week.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that too?
Well, yeah, the last one we had was on Sunday, and it was out in the suburban area. And we had probably 800 people. Wow. 80% of them were white, who were kind of walking hand in hand with us, saying Black Lives Matter. And I honestly, I would not have imagined that type of response.
How did that make you feel?
In the moment, it made me feel really good, to hear, to see families, whole families, with little kids, marching with us, with flags and signs. It made me feel very good in that moment. But then as I was driving home,
did you get pulled over for a taillight?
No, I wasn't pulled over for a taillight, but I was reminded that that's probably that's happened before, not this time.
Yeah.
But I was reminded of Amy Cooper, right? I was reminded of, and I would imagine that most of the people who are watching this, remember that story of Amy Cooper in New York, who is approached by a Black man in a birding part of Central Park, and tells her to, hey, you got to put your dog on a leash in this part of the park, and she resists and essentially calls the police and says, hey, I'm being threatened by a Black man. Right.
They call women like that on the internet, on social media, Karen.
Karen, right. Karen. But I think so much happened that we didn't really have an opportunity to talk about that and really dive deep into that. But just of what people who on one front may appear to be allies really think of the black people outside of the one friend they have, you know.
Yeah, you don't know what's going on in their minds specifically.
You really just don't know, and so that's kind of, you know, you've got hope that, hey man, these people, you know, these individuals, these, you know, brothers and sisters in Christ, you know, see us and know us and will walk with us and march with us. But then you also wonder, you know, what does it look like when this is over with?
What's been your experience with the police and with the public? Tell me your story, maybe one or two.
I grew up in a really small town, kind of the exurbs of Birmingham, Alabama, about 40 minutes outside of the city.
Yeah,
it was the traditional South, and so, you know, many of my experiences with the police, you know, came at teenage years, you know, in a very white dominant culture and society, you know. And so I think, you know, I was 12 when the LA riots broke out, right? I just remember the conversations that, number one, you know, our elders were having with us about just the ways in which you needed to conduct yourself when police pulled you over. And then, you know, when that moment actually happens, you know, I'm not eloquent enough to put into how it feels to be pulled over by the police as a black man. It's something that goes, you're triggered in a way that I just don't know how to explain, right? And I still feel that, you know, and I still feel that as a respectable black man with multiple degrees, and you still feel that. And so even, you know, I certainly haven't had any issues of brutality.
But there's that undercurrent of resentment every single time you get pulled over.
Yeah, there's that. You know, I remember that one of the first times I did get pulled over, you know, my family was pretty well off. You know, I came from a 2-parent home, and they both worked multiple jobs, you know, to get us to a place that, you know, they couldn't be. And so, you know, my mom had BMWs and Lexuses, right? And I remember driving my mom's Lexus for the first time, you know, 17, to school and getting pulled over. And, you know, this kind of, boy, what are you doing in this car? You know, and that kind of tone accompanied many more other iterations of just driving, you know, while black, right?
Today, do people still refer to you as boy?
I don't get that from police, but but there's certainly places, there's certainly areas of town where, you know, and I would say particularly, you know, and it comes from a particular person, you know, it's generally an older white male, you know, 70s, 80s, you know, who kind of was accustomed to a way of interacting with black people. I mean, that way it's just kind of stuck with him, right? I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to paint any other person, you know. I haven't got that from anyone. But yeah, I mean, there's still a few people that feel that way. I mean, and these are the people, and I'll put it this way. So the library that I am renovating right now, it's called Cosset Library. It was built in the 1800s, late 1800s.
Wow.
And up until 1960, blacks were not allowed in this library. Up until 1960.
1960.
1960.
Wow.
At that point, the people who were over the libraries were just building extra libraries for black people because they didn't want black people to be in branches.
But the one you're in is the crown jewel.
Yeah. And so what happened was, in the spring of 61, a group of black college students did a number of sit-ins at this library and said, hey, we're not going to leave until you give us equal access to this library system. And that led to the desegregation of the library system, not just in Memphis, but it kind of triggered a wave of desegregation of public spaces throughout the South.
Yeah.
But I had an opportunity to meet 8 of the individuals who were a part of that sit-in. I met them about a year and a half ago. You know, they're in their 70s now, right? And I remember one of them saying to me, hey, just like we're still around, the people who did not want us in that library are also still around. And they've had children now, and they've passed on that legacy to their children, right? And so that mentality certainly is still,
alive
evident,
and well,
particularly in the South, right? I mean, I can't speak to the coast or the heart of the country, but particularly in the South, Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia, still very much present.
All right, so I found my thingy from Eddie Glaude. He said, "We've been risking our lives for freedom ever since you brought us here." End quote. I was thinking, Blacks have been on furlough, meaning we go to a home where we have to report every night, and then we take off during the day to go to work and then come back and be at home. Where you're monitored regularly because you're still within the prison system or law enforcement. So it's called being on furlough.
Wow.
In law enforcement. And so it feels like we've been on furlough. We're not as free as we could be.
We're certainly not. I'm hoping that this moment begins to change that, right? Like you see, I've got glasses on. I've been blind all my life. But I remember the first time understanding that I needed corrective lenses, right? Like third grade. I'm in the back of the classroom, and I realized there's something's wrong. Like I can't see the way that the rest of the class is seeing. And so my parents take me to the eye doctor. They confirm that my vision's off, and fit me for the glasses. I go back a couple of days later, get the glasses, and then the next day I go in the classroom. I say, oh my God, I had no idea that this is how you're supposed to see. I had no idea that this is what all of the other people in my class, that this is what their vision looks like.
Wow.
And so what I'm hoping is that this particular moment is serving as the corrective lens for those who have been unable to see what we've been screaming since the beginning.
That's a really good way to put it. I know that for me, what I've been seeing is whites are struggling. I have a friend of mine who her husband, he's the one who follows the politics because she just can't, it's too hard for her, too painful. But what I'm also seeing is that she's really having a hard time with this, even though she's praying and repenting on behalf of white people. I can tell her when she says things here and there, she's still coming from that white filter, Republican filter. And she's like, well, not everything is political. So, yes, it is. Ever since she codified it in 1619. I didn't personally codify. I met you, plural. There's just the semantics. They're really struggling with this.
Yeah, I go back to that corrective lens piece, right? I think we have some brothers and sisters who were unable to see it, and then we have some who were unwilling to see it.
Yes.
The ones who were unable, I think this is proving a moment to help them be able to see it, right? And I think this is why it's important to have the type of conversation that you're having so that we can begin to show, no, this goes very deep. Racism permeates every single structure that we encounter every day. It's very much alive and present in our education, in our healthcare, in our housing, in our employment, in our mass transit systems.
But never our libraries. That never happened.
Never
the safe space for libraries.
Yeah.
I think that's the hope. Is it's not just this one issue, right? So we're seeing the protest broaden.
Yeah,
and we need more reporting about that because
have you noticed that there's still protests happening, but major networks aren't covering it anymore? I guess they got tired.
Yeah, I think that's where some of the frustration, that I talked about earlier, that's where some of that frustration comes in.
Right.
Not only are we in this current moment where we still, have not seen justice, for George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for countless others.
Yeah, let us not forget the cops that murdered Breonna Taylor are still free.
Are still free. And I guess the frustration is, well, man, y'all, how many more times does this have to happen? We've been, it seems like in this kind of perpetual cycle since Trayvon. How many more mothers have to lose their sons? How many more fathers have to lose their daughters? I mean, again, I'm encouraged by the protests and the marching, and I hope that people will persist in that. Will keep feet to the fire. This is going to be a long haul, man. This didn't develop over a couple of months or a couple
That's
of years.
right.
This is baked into who we are, and so that this fight's going to be a long haul, well beyond the likes and the retweets and shares that you'll get on social media. People are fighting this war, every day, and so that we've got to keep going.
Well, people want microwave solutions, and it's like, well, let's see. It took 400 years to get here. It's not going to take a couple of weeks to get over it. I mean, we got to win minds and hearts.
Yeah, and as Bill said, there's so many other ways in which this plays out. I mean, none of us can be in every lane. It's just not possible. We all kind of have to figure out, where we're going to be. And for me, I'm trying to use this moment to not only talk about police brutality, but to talk about the ways in which racism has undermined the education system, which has, created this endless cycle of school to prison pipelines. We've got to use this moment to pull the cover back off of so many different,
rip the Band-Aid off.
Right. I mean, Bill, you said the libraries. Certainly, the libraries have, or at least now trying to be one of the more equitable spaces. But when you think about just the ways in which they are created, the public planning process, right? And who gets the nice library? Who gets the nice park? Who gets the paved road? Even that, I think there are conversations that I'm seeing urban planners have, right? It's manifesting in ways in which conversations have to be had.
And that reminds me, a quick plug for the census. If you have not filled out your census paperwork, please do so. And even if you're not a resident of the United States, you can do it in such a way that you will not be found. Please turn in that census because it's extremely important right now.
Absolutely.
Especially in this climate.
Thank you.
Tell me a little bit about, now I know that you jumped out of full-time ministry, church ministry. If now is the time, what is it the church has to do? So tell me a little bit about your experience. What does justice look like in the church? Call it out. Be bold.
That's a great question. I'm curious to know, some of y'all have had this conversation in previous podcasts. I'd love to just kind of hear what you all have talked about and maybe what.
No, just you.
Just me? Okay. It is to me. It is again, and I am a lot of my responses from what does it mean to be in the United States, the South, and so to me, it's been very telling to see the people who are not speaking. When I think about contemporary Christian artists, when I think about certain leaders within the Southern Baptist Convention, the people who are not saying anything, right? So
up to and including the fact that yesterday in Dallas was a summit on law enforcement and racism without inviting the district attorney, the chief of police, and the county sheriff, who are all Black. And then the mayor, who is Black, said, yeah, I got something else going on, because he wasn't going to show up without his lieutenants. And it was and that summit was held in a white evangelical church called Gateway in Dallas, North Dallas.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with it. Yeah, so I think at this moment, man, when I talked about the march that we had out in the suburbs, right? A couple of days before that march happened, I'm a part of a collective of pastors and church leaders. And we share emails from time to time. We meet from time to time, and we come together, and we do lots of things in the community, backpack drives and coat drives and things like that. And one of the leaders from that collective sent out an email and said, hey, there's going to be a protest on Sunday. We should be there passing out water and to model what a peaceful protest would look like. And I said, hey, that's great, but are y'all going to actually march? They said, no, we're not going to do that. Like, we'll be on the sidelines with the water.
Wow, what a metaphor.
And certainly, I mean, people need water. I mean, it was a hot day. It was 93 degrees outside, so certainly people needed water. But what we needed in that moment was for those pastors and those stakeholders to be on the lines with us, to be marching with us, to not be shoulder to shoulder, to not be on the sidelines, right? And so I think that kind of first step of justice is getting the people, again, who have been the people who were unable to see are seeing in this moment. And so that's helpful. But the people who have been unwilling to see are still in this moment where they don't want to see. For whatever reason, whether they're scared that they're going to scare off people or whatever, we need those people to dive in. Furthermore, I talk a lot when I meet with these individuals that there are really three things we've got to do in our communities. Right? We've got to do the work of relief. We've got to provide immediate relief. There are lots of people in our communities that are hurting. They need shelter, they need clothing, they need food, they need, to get out of abusive situations. So we've got to provide the relief, right? Mm-hmm. The second thing we've got to do is we've got to resource people, right? So we can't just keep giving people food and backpacks and things. Like, we've got to actually equip people with the skills and the resources and the knowledge to be able to try to get a better life for themselves, right? But then thirdly, we've got to do some reform. We've got to change some structures that have caused the first two things to be in place, right? And what I'm seeing and what I have seen from a lot of my white brothers and sisters is a huge willingness to jump in and do the relief work, to provide the backpacks, to provide the food. But then when we have to go and speak to the school board that is disciplining Black students at a 5 times higher rate than they are the white students, mm-hmm. They, for some reason, are shuddering with me, or they find it difficult to show up with me in that. And so, again,
have they expressed to you that why it's difficult?
A lot of the people that they're having to call out are their friends, or their church members, or their neighbors, and that's just really uncomfortable. To me, it's uncomfortable to know that we're disciplining Black students at a far higher rate. We're disciplining Black students for acting out
as if they're being groomed for jail,
as if prison. They're being, in what we know, particularly here, right? So I'm in a couple of schools. I'm in a middle school where I'm working with young boys, and we're trying to work with the administrators to implement this restorative justice model, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm also in an elementary school where we're reading to second graders. There's a program that hone in on second grade Black boys, right? Because we've got to get them on reading level by third grade, because third grade is the grade in which the private prisons, which are about 35 miles from us, start building new facilities based on how well the third grade boys can read, right? And so we have to be able to speak to this stuff. We have to be able to call it out. And so when we now know that these private prisons are making bukus of money, mm-hmm. But for doing this, right? So, and we now know that those same people are in the pockets of the people who are making the laws and distributing the funds to keep schools inadequate, right? And so there's just kind of this huge cycle that's happening. And so we need our brothers and sisters to see these things, right, as for what they are, and to begin to join us in the work of reforming, and not just providing these young boys, these young men, with relief work. Let's reform it so that we can break that cycle.
I mean, one answer why they're not doing it is a little bit harder, right?
Yeah, it's hard work. It's hard work. It's uncomfortable.
But I also agree. It's like, very often it's easier to talk to a stranger than those people, especially people that you're going to see in the playgrounds or the baseball league or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Are you more tired or more hopeful? I think you had mentioned the intergenerational divide, and you said the elders were like, I told you so. And then I kind of characterized the youth as the modern move fast and break things kind of thing.
Yeah. It depends on the day. I would say more often than not, I'm more tired. And again, I think this is just because we've been here, man. We've been here. The video is still, I can't get that image out of my head.
Yeah, I couldn't watch it. I saw him on the ground. I'm like, I can't do it.
It's just, I'm not in full-time ministry anymore. And I'll tell you kind of what happened. First off, Black mega churches, the staffs of those churches are often having to do 3 and 4 things, right? Like, they just don't have the resources that many of the white mega churches have. So where they may have, 4 or 5 people in youth ministry, Black church is going to be 1 or 2. And so I was just doing a lot of stuff. My last 18 months in ministry, I was a multi-site campus pastor. I was handling the marketing. I was handling all of the technology, both software and hardware. And I was really functioning with all those things, kind of also functioning as a strategy person, almost kind of executive path in that role. The last year and a half or so, there were, at this location that I was pastoring, there was a number of people who got terminal cancer. And one guy was about my age. This guy was just solid. Anytime We were doing an outreach event. He was there. He cooked. He was just the type of person that you just wanted, just the star church volunteer person. And he and his wife got married, and they went to honeymoon off the coast of, I think, Catalina Island, actually. They went to honeymoon there. And while he was there, he got sick. And they didn't know what happened. They didn't, he was just so ill that he just couldn't move. So they got him back to the mainland and got him to a couple of hospitals, and they found out that he had a multiple myeloma, he had this kind of this rare blood cancer, right? And they said, hey, man, you got, 6 months to live. And I walked with that guy, and I walked with that guy, and I walked with that guy, as he was doing chemo, as he was doing all of these, experimental treatments and stuff. And just nothing was really working. And I remember the night that he was getting ready to transition, and his wife called me and said, hey, he's probably got about, 30 minutes or so before he transitions. And, need you to get here. And so I get in the hospital, and his mom is there, and his wife is there, his aunt is there. They're singing songs to him, and for a moment, he and we connect, eyes connect, and I could see the pain. His body was just physically, just the pain was there, but I could also see the agony, the grief, knowing that he was getting ready to die, and he was leaving his mom, and he was leaving his wife, and he was leaving everything that he loved. And I left the hospital that night, and I don't know how many of the people who are watching this, if you've ever actually been with someone as they were passing away. It's a traumatic thing to see, right?
Yeah,
and that happened.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, that happened to me a couple of more times, and it just became so overwhelming that I said, I think I just need to pull away from this for a little bit, right? And then I watched that video of George Floyd, and you see the same thing. I feel like there's a moment where his eyes connect with the camera, and you just say, "Oh my God!" Like, man, how many more times do we have to see this? How many more times do we have to hear, "I can't breathe," before we change this stuff? How many, even beyond that, we just looked at COVID, right? And we just saw the disproportionate ways in which COVID was taking out Black people. Mm-hmm. Because of comorbidities, because of lack of health care, quality healthcare systems in our urban centers and things of that nature. And it's like, how much longer does this stuff have to happen? So, in that way, I would say I'm more tired. But again, there's always hope. There's always hope. There are always people on the front lines who are doing the work. They're always, God's always moving in some way. Just gotta pull away from the stuff that we see in the news that dominates the headlines and try to figure out and try to see where it is that God is moving.
That's a great transition to, I think, our last question. Tell me a little bit about this community library, this project. You said that you were focused on how a library could reshape the community. Tell me something about that.
Well, I think libraries have always been I think there's a great fondness that people have with the library, and I feel even now that, the library really is one of the last few spaces that will welcome you regardless. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your faith walk is. Doesn't matter what type of education you have. Doesn't even matter where you slept last night. You can come in a library, and hopefully feel safe and feel welcome. About 4 years ago, a number of people, this is before I even came into the picture, a number of people began to reimagine what this, kind of think differently about what this library can be, and they really thought of it as and I think all libraries are having to have this conversation because, knowledge is so accessible online now, right? You can Google so many things. People have tablets where they can download ebooks and those sorts of things. And so libraries as a whole are having to pivot and having to figure out, how do we serve the community now? And in this particular library here in Memphis, they really wanted to center it as a community center, as this kind of this vibrant creation space, with a number of really great resources. So in this space is, a community cafe, a performing arts center that would do, kind of free, plays and shows, a co-working space that again would be free. It would offer you kind of some of the same amenities that you would get at a traditional co-working space, lockable storage, whiteboards and those sorts of things. And then also some recording space, right? So there's an area for you to do a podcast, a voiceover, kind of an indie album, and then also a kind of video photography side where you could do a YouTube video, or if you made a button, or you made some jewelry, you want to take a picture of it. You can come to the library and get a light box and get a nice camera and take a good picture so you can upload it to your website or whatever it may be. And so a lot of the work right now for me, when I saw that, it immediately resonated with me. I said, "Hey man, this is what should be in a library." But so often, when these types of things happen, when they're built, they're not for everybody. They're put in a part of town where everybody's not able to get to, or they're policies that are created in such a way where it's like, well, hey, make sure that those people don't touch it. And so a lot of my work now has been, figuring out, number one, how do we, what are the things that we need to do to truly make this inclusive, for everybody. But then also, saying, hey, this is in the part of downtown. This is an affluent area. Certainly there are a number of people that come throughout the day who are experiencing homelessness. But for the most part, this is an affluent space. People who come down here to work for major corporations and such. How do we make sure that this is not confined to just the downtown area? How do we get this into neighborhoods where where kids who can't get here? And so that's where a lot of my work is. That's kind of thinking both on the ground, but also kind of the 35,000 feet level. How do we transfer this to make sure that it's equitable and that everybody across the city gets access to it?
Do current events is that kind of reshaping a little bit what it's going to look like?
I think it's certainly shaping the conversations that we have. I've been very, very inspired recently by the work of Bridge Alliance. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Bridge Alliance. It's a makeup of several hundred organizations that are focused on trying to create the environment in which we can have these conversations, try to bridge us where there are divides. And so I think that what these events are certainly doing is that they're providing a canvas from which we can paint a new picture for what does it mean for us to have an equitable and just society.
So what you're telling me is there hope?
There's always hope. It's always hope. Always hope.
You are a treasure. You really are. Memphis I'm jealous. You need to be out here.
Hey man, I hope when I know this Passion Talks is going online, but next year I'll certainly come back. I love the work that's happening out there. I get so inspired when I come out to that area, when I just kind of see the creativity and I see the innovation.
I hope you're contemplating doing a Passion Talk on this library project.
Yeah, actually, I did submit. Now, I mean, I've been a previous
presenter.
Presenter. So I don't want to cloud any new people that want opportunities. But yeah, certainly at some point in time, hopefully.
No, but this is new. You're not going to say the same.
I don't know anybody else going to do a presentation on a library.
So hopefully at some point in time we're able to get back out there with you all and share it. And I thank you all for this. And Bill, it has not gone unnoticed that you've just been listening for the most part, man. And
yes.
I think that we all should take on that posture, right? That we all need to be active listeners and kind of hear where we are. So I appreciate that, man.
I appreciate your time and sharing. These are tough questions. They're important questions, deep questions. An hour doesn't even begin, but
sure.
Great sharing about your friend in the hospital and the eyeglass story. Those things are very, very, very meaningful.
Thank you all for joining us today. Please follow me on Twitter at Revivalist News. My Facebook page is facebook.com/The Revivalist News Network. Hashtag the RNN, like CNN, but RNN. And if you have any questions, leave comments say something. We want to hear from you. And if you have any story ideas, absolute conversation ideas, tell me about it. We want to engage. So have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much, Shamichael. We will talk some more at another juncture. Be at peace. Walk in peace. Peace out.